Conventional agriculture is causing a myriad of environmental problems, climate change being one of the biggest ones.
We didn't do much at all about climate change. So now we're seeing exactly what scientists told us we would see.
Conventional production of crops is also a leading cause of tropical deforestation, siltation of coral reefs. It's causing dead zones in the oceans. On the flip side, farming using an ecological approach can create wildlife habitat. It can restore ecosystems.
What's important to realize is that people who are doing interesting, sustainable agriculture are absolutely on the cutting edge.
People often think that hunger, environmental degradation, climate change are separate issues, but these issues are all intrinsically connected, and the solutions to these problems also need to be connected. As a child, I spent lots of time behind my house just exploring, wandering through the woods. I would spend hours in a tree near our house, and I would sit up in the crook of that tree reading books or spying on people coming to visit the house. In college, I studied environmental conservation and ended up really focusing my studies on tropical deforestation. So I learned how people were cutting down more of the forest every year in order to grow crops, and how certain agricultural practices were more inclined to lead to deforestation.
Humans are used to thinking of themselves as a small part of the vast world around them. And really, that's what we always were for a long time, until sometime in the last couple of centuries when we've gotten large enough that we've begun to affect everything around us.
Agriculture in the food system is somewhere between a quarter and a third of all of humanity's emissions. So there's a room for it to at least be responsible for itself. Cleaning up its own act, as all sectors of civilization need to do. But also, unlike, let's say, transportation or electricity generation, there is room not only to reduce emissions, but to actually sequester carbon. So I think actually it can play a disproportionately large role.
So the biggest role of the climate disaster is the same system that is driving peasants off the land, that is causing a chronic disease epidemic. So no matter what problem you look at, it's the industrial food system that's driving the problems.
There are decades of research showing the delicate balance between food production, climate, and a healthy environment. During the last few months of my Peace Corps service, I worked on agroforestry and sustainable agriculture projects. I came to really understand that the farmers in Central America really wanted to shift to sustainable farming practices that would protect and improve the environment while also producing more for their families and their communities. So when I left the Peace Corps, I really wanted to get a job where I could dedicate myself to helping them get the technical assistance they wanted to transition to sustainable farming practices. And when I got home from Peace Corps, I was shocked to find that there was no such organization in existence. And eventually that led me into founding Sustainable Harvest International in 1997. If you live on planet Earth and you eat food, then you are very much connected to the farmers in Central America, even if it doesn't seem obvious at first. I come to Central America every year, but never cease to be amazed at how willing the people are to make changes so that there is a healthier environment where they live and a healthier environment for all of us and healthier food and more food for everybody. Hola, Harrison. Mucho gusto. Young people all over the world are much more aware of climate change than I was growing up, and it makes sense because they're the ones who are going to be living the longest with the consequences of it. But they're also the ones that have the opportunity to turn things around.
Me llamo Gerson Domínguez Sánchez, tengo 24 años, vivo acá en Colonia Pinares, La Trinidad.
Harrison's been working for 3 years now, transitioning to sustainable farming practices and organic gardening, working alongside his wife and their 3-year-old son, Dylan.
En el año 2021, yo conocí la institución de cosecha sostenible, entonces desde allí, desde esa fecha, estamos trabajando. De todas las técnicas que nos han enseñado, me ha gustado la técnica en poder sembrar. La hemos aplicado en el café, en el plátano, y si hablamos también de las siembras de verdura, también excelente. Por la parte de abono, son orgánicos, ¿verdad? Y en la parte ya fumigaciones, también orgánicas, y ellos nos han enseñado esas técnicas, aún de las mismas plantas que tenemos a nuestro alrededor, de allí sacamos los insumos para fumigación. Aquí en mi casa, lo que tengo sembrado, ahorita tengo tomate, tengo pepino, zanahoria, remolacha, hay chile, culantro, hay apio, hay aguacate, naranja, hay nance, tengo piña, guineo, plátano y café. Últimamente estamos consumiendo lo que sembramos acá. Se nos hace más fácil porque lo cosechamos acá naturalmente. Sí, por ejemplo, el tomate, la zanahoria, el chile, el pepino. Entonces ya eso es una gran ayuda para nosotros porque ya no lo compramos. El cambio que ha pasado en mi vida es la alimentación.
It's so easy to go in the shop to get some food. Imagine from one day to another going in the shop and find no food. That's exactly what will happen if we are not taking care of our soil.
Si cuidamos bien lo que es la parte del suelo, de la tierra, va a haber más cosecha.
Every bit of food we eat is the biodiversity, is the soil, is the water, is the sun. A plant is the most amazing technology. It takes carbon dioxide with the sunlight for free. It gives us food. That process is what cools the planet, and it gives us our breath, so we are alive.
Me encanta trabajar la tierra, pero me dieron muchas ganas de irme de mi país.
Sí.
Sí, bastante. Y yo tengo hermanos allá, en el extranjero, pero...
¿Y por qué quiso salir?
Bueno, lo
Se
más...
ve muy bonito aquí.
Sí, pero a veces ponemos como obstáculo, ¿verdad? Las cuestiones de las finanzas, el dinero.
Sí.
Más difícil conseguirlo,
Sí,
¿verdad?
sí.
Ya hay más oportunidades, que puede haber
Sí.
más dinero.
Sí.
Pero yo creo de que si trabajamos acá duramente,
Sí.
yo creo que se puede lograr cualquier cosa.
There's nothing as gratifying to me as to read about or to visit farmers who've figured out how to break away from the paradigm that they've been endlessly instructed by the chemical companies to follow, and instead are building remarkable farms that provide protein and carbohydrates and fats, that provide beauty, that provide cover to soil, that provide more carbon in the soil.
if you talk to an ordinary person and you tell them, listen, the climate is changing, you'd better change your food system, it would be unfair on them. But if you tell them that, all that extra money you're spending on healthcare, you can totally avoid that issue if you eat food produced with the rhythms of nature, the diversity of nature, they might get interested. What is good for the soil is good for your health. And then you take that and say, you can be part of the solution, growing a bit of your own food. If you're a farmer, not give up the right ways of farming. But even if you're not a farmer, find ways to relate to real farmers to get real food.
Yeah, I think it's important, that everybody contributes to the change. It's not only up to the farmers to introduce better farming practices, but it's also the general public, when they make their choices in the supermarket, that they actually think hard about, what was the environmental cost of that cheap tomato.
Ese es el cambio. Ya no comer, no alimentarse con cosas que están contaminadas, sino que comerlas limpias. Entonces ese mensaje y ese pensamiento para la generación que viene, como mi hijo, ¿verdad? Que ya no se enfoque a comprar allá afuera, sino que lo cultive él en casa.
Gracias. I've always loved the environment, but until I was in Central America, I wasn't able to connect the dots between our food system and our environment. Doña Isabel is so inspiring because she is so completely dedicated to making life better for everybody in the community.
Mi nombre es Isabel Montoya. Tengo 70 años y me siento con fuerza de trabajar, de luchar por el bienestar de mi comunidad.
She heard about a program where people were learning about agroecology practices that allowed them to produce more on their land. And so she walked hours to find the people that were providing that technical assistance and ask them to come and share the technical assistance in her community as well.
Y cuando llegamos, mucha gente dijeron, ¿qué andan haciendo estas señoras acá? ¿Qué andan buscando? Nosotros les dijimos, los motiva lo que están haciendo y vamos a buscar para poder hacer un grupo en nuestra comunidad. Hoy nos sentimos agradecidos porque tenemos un técnico que nos ha venido a abrir la mente porque estábamos tristes, porque no hallábamos qué hacer. Pero de repente y ahora pues ya podemos conocer cómo poder tratar las plantas, cómo poder tratar el ambiente.
Sí.
Y eso nos da mucha alegría.
¿Y ha visto cambios en la tierra, en las plantas, en la producción?
En las tierras he visto cambios.
Sí.
Y he visto cambios en las plantaciones, que con los medicamentos que preparamos naturales,
Sí.
El bocachi, hemos visto que las plantas han revivido. Tenemos ya cítricos. Tenemos ya un vivero comunitario, tenemos invernadero, tenemos donde producir el abono, donde hacer foliares, donde hacer el bocachi. Ya tenemos un equipo que ya lo conseguimos y eso me alegra.
People who are doing expensive, chemical-laden agriculture are stuck someplace in the mid-20th century and have missed so much that we have learned in time since. The most progressive and interesting farmers on this planet are often found far off at the end of dirt roads in parts of Asia or Africa or Central America or South America, figuring out how you can provide in abundance with low inputs and some real positive effect on the world around you. That's the miracle of farming.
Mire, esta tierra era una tierra como desierto, como un desierto. Se ha convertido en una tierra que es fértil y se va a restaurar más y más cada día.
Globally, we need anyway to preserve all the environment and mainly the soil to be able to continue to produce for the next generation and the next generation after the next generation. The best people that could preserve all those resources and this soil capital are the farmers themselves. If the farmers are properly trained, if they are properly oriented with the regenerative agriculture or agroecology as a whole, then they will be able to continue producing for ages, and then humanity will be able to stay on Earth.
Everyone is welcome at the farmer field school that they've created. Everyone comes together. They all contribute to the work of creating the natural fertilizers, the different types of compost, the natural pesticides that they make from plants, the tree seedlings, the vegetable seedlings. They all come together to create that and then to share it so that it's spread out amongst all the families on all of the farms in the community.
No hemos tenido ninguna autoridad que nos haya ayudado, ninguna autoridad. Pero nosotros hemos hecho autoridad en nuestra comunidad por el bienestar de nosotros mismos, sembrando más árboles y protegiendo las fuentes de agua y cuidando el medio ambiente. Qué bonito es querer la naturaleza. Eso es precioso. Dice que el que siembra buena cosecha, buen fruto lo espera.
The biggest change that I notice is when I go back to visit a farm many years after the farmer has shifted to ecological farming practices, and land that had few or no trees now will have towering trees that are shading a lot of other plants, and there's just an incredible diversity growing at every level.
Restoring degraded land is sort of synonymous with bringing back its carbon. So you're sequestering carbon while you're improving the ability of the land to produce food at the same time.
If all 500 million smallholder farmers around the world, the farmers just growing on a few acres, if they all used these ecological farming practices, they could get us 54% of the way to the United Nations goals for net greenhouse gas reductions.
We've upset the physical cycles on which so much, including farming, maybe farming above all, depends. The way that water moves around this planet and the way the seasons work are the things that, above all, farmers depend on, and they no longer can.
Mi nombre es María Rodríguez. Tengo 52 años y vivo en mi comunidad A3. Siempre me gustó la tierra. Mi papá era agricultor y yo crecí viéndolo a él como sembraba arroz, yuca, maíz. Todo, prácticamente no comprábamos nada.
Normally, people get lulled into thinking, oh, climate change means Sweden will have warm oceans. No, climate change means you won't know whether you have winter or summer. You won't know whether you're going to have dryness or floods. You won't know what tomorrow will be like. The earth created the climate, and that system is being disrupted.
Cuando era niña, recuerdo cuando vivía con mi papá, el clima sí era diferente, era marcado tanto el verano como el invierno.
Sí.
Mi papá podía decir, viene el invierno o va a comenzar el verano.
Sí.
No así ahora, que vemos que a veces el verano se extiende hasta los meses que ya debería ser invierno. Igual a veces el invierno se pasa para el verano. No están tan marcados como antes. Sí ha habido cambios.
We experience the change in climate every day in our life. Temperature, precipitation, storms. The farmers are experiencing also drought and excess of water. And with soil rich in carbon, you can use the soil as a sponge to get the water in instead of floating and going in the river and the sea. And this water will be useful for the plant.
Agradezco también al programa Cosecha Sostenible porque nos enseñaron a sembrar y que luego seleccionáramos la semilla la mejor. Y la secáramos y la empacáramos pues. Y que hiciéramos como un banco de semillas y de ahí nos intercambiáramos así con las otras familias.
Qué bueno.
Y si otra persona pues, que estaba fuera del grupo quería también se le compartía.
Why we need to really support smallholder farmers is they are our guardians for our water, for our biodiversity, and a world where we mitigate the climate change through healthy agronomic practices.
Stories about climate change are often about the difficult transitions that people have to make, but there are very easy transitions that farmers in Central America want to make because it allows them to feed their families better, it allows them to produce more on their farms, and it just so happens that it also plays a big role in stabilizing the climate.
Most of the practices that sequester the highest amount of carbon per acre or per hectare are currently limited to the tropics and mostly practiced by smallholders. This sort of a very, very dense tree-based agroforestry systems are mostly practiced by smallholders. So they did the least to cause the problem, they're most vulnerable to it, and they're doing the most about it.
No hay terreno malo. Todos los terrenos, si tú lo vas mejorando, lo vas trabajando, ellos van mejorando y te van a producir.
Today, so much money is being spent by governments and by businesses to support destructive farming practices. Redirecting even a fraction of that to support the transition of smallholder farmers to ecological farming practices would be enough to transform our world food system.
Governments in every case need to break away from the embrace of big anything. Big oil, big pharma, and big ag are setting government policy around agriculture and energy everywhere. And that's a huge mistake. A repurposing of those subsidies in the direction of small-scale, ecologically sound farming would be an enormous, enormous shift. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out what we need to do. We're starting to see it happen, but it's not yet happening at the speed we need it to.
Globally, we're at something like $700 billion a year of money going into agriculture from governments, and something like 2% of it is going to environmentally friendly practices. So right now, governments are mostly funding the wrong kinds of agriculture. So the first thing to do would be to stop paying for the wrong stuff and take some of that money and put it in the other direction. Because if a farmer's trying to do the right thing and they're competing with someone doing a less beneficial practice whose practice is subsidized in some way by the government, it's very hard to compete there. So can we stop funding the bad stuff and start funding the good stuff?
So we are really talking about huge potential. Now, the power of this potential is A, it's in the hands of small farmers. B, it has established science behind it. C, it is not just a climate solution, it is the only way to grow more and nutritious food. Because we are not facing just a climate crisis. We are facing a climate crisis with a biodiversity crisis, with a hunger and malnutrition crisis, all of that together. And here, in the hands of farmers, is the potential to address all of them.
When I was a child, my father had a term when he really liked somebody, he would say, sweet as a carrot.
Oh, that's
and
great.
I always thought that was strange because when I was growing up in the 70s, the carrots from the supermarket,
They were not
sweet.
Yes.
And I thought,
Yeah.
what does this mean? And then later, I think it might have actually been here, I had a carrot and it was really sweet. I said, oh. When my father grew up in the 30s, he was eating carrots that were sweet.
Parents in the local towns have told us that their kids ask them to go buy our carrots.
Yes.
They call them candy carrots.
Yes.
And it isn't anything special. We just try and make sure the soil is perfectly ready for a carrot crop.
Right.
And we've dealt with the weeds beforehand.
Yep.
And if you do things right, the food is the way it should be, the way
That's
it's
right.
always been. Yeah. When I've been in Central America, those farms are all being run the way we run this place because we're not based on modern technology. We're based on making the soil fertile and putting the crops in and looking after everything there. And that can be done anywhere. And everybody can afford to do it. That's the best part of it.
Yes. I think you just summed up everything that we want to say. Max, we don't need you to make the film anymore. We can just have those 2 sentences from Elliot and we're good.
It's the way farming was always done and the way it can be done. It's just the world has gotten into thinking that if you're modern, you have to buy your inputs.
Right.
And we don't buy any inputs.
Right.
We grow the fertility right here.
The conventional wisdom even a generation ago was that topsoil was something that took centuries, if not millennia, to build. And we now know from example after example that good farming is able to build rich, tilthy soils in a matter of years. And that's a promising, hopeful thing.
We live in a time of formidable challenges, including the climate crisis. Yet these are also times of great opportunity, where these challenges can inspire us to harness new knowledge and human ingenuity to create a better world. One opportunity that stands out in terms of scale and impact is the prospect of expanding the use of proven agroecology practices to feed the world, to improve prosperity, to reduce deforestation, to enhance biodiversity, and to sequester vast amounts of atmospheric warming gases such as carbon dioxide. So I join others in supporting Sustainable Harvest International's work to scale its impact from thousands of farms to 1 million farms and beyond. The reallocation of even a small fraction of public agricultural support and philanthropic funding to these practices could have a game-changing impact on several 100 million small farms.
When I think about future generations and what sort of planet they're going to have, and I see how much harm is being done, I really worry. But then I look at the farms in Central America and see the farmers that are literally and figuratively planting the seeds, that are growing trees, that are growing healthy soils, that are growing a healthy planet. It makes me want to give everything I can to them to continue that transformation so that my child and everybody's children will have a planet that will maintain human society. Food security, human dignity, and environmental sustainability shouldn't be seen as a privilege or something extra. They should be seen as the basis from which we build our society.